Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Everyone, welcome into the program. I hope that you're doing well and you are ready for today's show. Because today on the program, you may have guessed it, we have Ralph Bond. He joins us as our science and tech trends correspondent, where everything that science touches. You know, he's not really afraid to talk about it. Some of the stuff can get heady, but at the same time, some of the stuff is just very, very cool. And I think he did a good job of that this time around. Brought us 4 different stories and then some to talk about here on the show today to, really, kind of uplift you because, hey, it's the holidays and that's what we all need. So everyone, welcome back into the program. ComputerAmerica.com. That's where, of course, you'll find everything, including a whole section dedicated to Ralph and his past shows. And of course, the show notes. Those will be prominent right there on the home screen when you get there because, if you want to check some of the stories out, Ralph does his best to kind of cut them down a bit, but there's always more information, more sources, more links. These stories are obviously, we're going to try to bring them to you as digestible and simply as we can, but there's always more to see. So computeramerica.com. Also, while you're there, check out social media, check out all that good stuff. Always want to remind people that the last week of the year, we usually take off between Christmas and New Year's, and then we'll be back. And, trust me, the first week of January, always very busy with CES 2024. So really looking forward to that here shortly. Now, with that being said, everyone, I want to bring on Ralph and just, get the show started. So, as I said before, science and tech trends correspondent, and what that means, he'll tell you. But Ralph, welcome back into the program. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, and it's great to be here, and it's also always wonderful every Friday for you and me to give the audience reason to be uplifted and hopeful thanks to what's going on in science and technology, because you can have a whole world of what horrible stuff in the Ukraine, terrible tragedy in the Middle East, our government falling apart at the seams, all that. No negative here. This is all going to be stuff that makes you want to continue getting up every day and marching forward with the hope that science and technology will get us out of our problems if we have the will to do it. And we'll look at everything from robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, space research, physics, all across the board. That's what we're going to do. Come out to computeramerica.com, as Ben was saying. Get the show notes, because what we'll do today is just give you kind of like the greatest hits highlights, skip a stone across the water of each of these stories. If you want to dive deeper, we've got links. And sometimes with the data I pull from each of these articles, I add some additional educational side notes and so forth. All that's in the show notes. There's a Ralph Bond tab on computeramerica.com where you'll be able to find this very easily. And so we're ready to be uplifted and inspired.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you have a nice mixture of stories today, everything from, the ocean to space to, obviously, spoiler alert, medical. But I think we're going to start in everyone's favorite place, because I know, Ralph, for you and your family, you just got back from vacation, which, I'm glad everyone had such a good time. And I'm sure that when it came time to book travel plans, everyone's like Hawaii or Detroit, and your family chose Hawaii. No, everyone makes wrong mistakes, but we can go to Detroit here with story number 1.
Yes, that's right. And this is a big salute to the Midwest. Very important, very interesting. Could not resist this headline. Detroit now has the country's first wireless charging road for electric vehicles. Wireless charging road. How could you resist that? Comes from Scripps News. And in the show notes, I have another link for the Government of Detroit official press release, to check that out. A very, very interesting story here. There's a lot of things about it that are kind of reality check, but let's get into it. Detroit has the first wireless charging road in the United States, a new 1/4 mile. So we're not talking about a huge, extensive thing, but a new 1/4 mile roadway west of downtown Detroit can charge your electric vehicle while you drive or idle or park on the street. And the technology is by Electrion, an Israel-based developer of wireless charging solutions for electric vehicles. And it works using copper coils under the road and receivers on electric vehicles. So stop. This is experimental. We're going to learn more about how this is a trial, okay? And to make this work, your car has to be equipped with a special receiver, no surprise, produced by this outfit called Electrion, okay? So when a car with a receiver is close to the coils, electricity transfers wirelessly through a magnetic field, charging the vehicle's battery. Sound familiar? You got your smartphone and you put it into your wireless charger. Same concept, okay? That's what we're talking about. So using technology from Electrion, 14th Street between Marantet, I hope I'm saying that right, and Dazel Streets is now equipped with inductive charging coils that will charge electric vehicles equipped with Electrion receivers, as we said before, as they drive on the road. Now, this is first blush, experimental, kind of looking into the future here of where we might be going with this. So keep that in mind. But the road will be used, this 1/4 mile, to test and perfect this wireless charging technology in a real world environment, and before making it available to the public in the next few years. So keep that in mind. And then a little side note.
Test it by the 1/4 mile before you start doing it by the hundreds of miles. So yeah,
absolutely. And there's so much we'll talk about in terms of reality check, not from a negative point of view, but we'll get into that in a second. There's so many things that spin in my head the minute I started looking at this story. But a little side note, what are inductive charging coils? Well, induction charging coils are copper tubes that are shaped into coils and carry an alternating current. And they create a magnetic field that transfers energy to another coil in a nearby device. Okay? This allows for wireless charging of devices without physical contact. Induction charging coils are used for charging smartphones, tablets, and other devices, as we alluded to a moment ago. And here's a fun thing. Side note, wireless power seems cutting edge, but it was actually pioneered more than 100 years ago by good old Nikola Tesla. Tesla, does that sound familiar? That's why the cars are called that. Anyway, Nikola Tesla, if you're not familiar with him, fascinating character. I think there's a documentary about his life on Netflix. I think it really goes to show just kind of how you could look at like Steve Jobs, where almost like the advertising of the person was very, very important when it came to the person behind the stories. But it's like Edison became very, very famous through good marketing and stuff like that. And then, people are starting to have a renaissance of Tesla, I should say Nikola Tesla. And Ralph, there's right now, like even now, like 100 years later, there's still like a PR battle between the two, which, please go check out some of the documentaries. They're very interesting. Yes. Yeah. Well, it's so interesting, Ben, because Tesla, his great dream was, let's not have all these wires and poles and, transmitting energy. Can't we transmit electricity, somehow deliver it wirelessly through the air? And you think 100 years ago, wow, what a vision.
He was able to, I think, light a light bulb over like 100 miles or something like that. I'm trying to remember the exact experiment, but you're right. And it's so interesting now, the descendants, as it were, of his thinking. Our own space agencies and MIT and others are thinking about putting gigantic solar energy capturing things in orbit over the Earth, and then wirelessly through microwaves transmitting the energy down to the Earth, right? So, I mean, it's so fun to think of the descendants of Nikola Tesla's vision, like you were saying before the show. What is old is new again. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm hoping that applies to me. Anyway, let's go on. Here we go. So when a car with a receiver, and again, that's the qualifier, travels over a road with charging segments, so the coils in the road, electricity is wirelessly transmitted through a magnetic field, as we mentioned a moment ago. This electricity is then transferred as energy to the vehicle's battery, charging it, just like your smartphone when you cradle it in one of these wireless charging stands. So as noted before, these charging segments can transfer wirelessly electricity to the receiver, whether the vehicle is parked, which they call static charging, or is driving in motion, which they call dynamic charging. And that part really fascinates me, that they can even do that. The static parking, they're charging, it kind of seems very logical, but the idea that you can do this even if you're moving is fascinating, I think. And the electric road is safe for drivers, they say, pedestrians, and wildlife. Each coil in the road is activated only when a vehicle with an approved receiver passes over the coil. And this ensures that energy transfer is controlled and provided only to vehicles that require it, or frankly are equipped with it, with the receiver. And the Michigan State Department of Transportation and this Israeli-based company Electrion have committed to a 5-year partnership to develop new electric road systems in the city. So this is just the very beginning of this effort. Let's see how it works out. Now, Ben, I alluded to some reality check things that were going on in my mind as I read this story. There's a tremendous amount of infrastructure implications with this. In the image that's in the show notes, folks, if you're on the video, you can see the show notes. They show this kind of like utility box that's associated with this electrification of the roadway in question. So there's all of that infrastructure that would have to be put in place. Then how do you manage the bit about approved okay receivers? Do you make this an open source technology so that many manufacturers can produce these receivers and add them to the cars? Could you retrofit existing cars like mine to be able to use this technology? Up, down, in, out. Part of me thinks probably the most compelling initial motivation for this from, say, like a city of Detroit, a good-sized city, would be maybe for public transit purposes. Other things of this nature. This might be the thing that pushes the needle forward to implement, and then consumer cars or small cars and so forth, the trucks and so on, could get into this game as well. But we'll see. I mean, it's a lot of things that would have to happen.
So what I really like about this is that, having new technology and hearing that they're just putting something in Detroit, kind of buries the lead a little bit, because if you go on their website and check out the projects, kind of what else they've done, they actually have a good, probably 20 to 30 projects already underway in China, Norway, Italy, Israel,
that's true.
Places
Good
in the
point.
United States.
Yes.
They have they're working all over the world with this. And to your point about public transit, the majority of them seem to be bus depots and bus routes, and in some cases like business parks where they'll have like shuttles. So, to what vehicles this would apply to, it looks like they're not really looking to retrofit every single electric car on the road. But if you could put these in under the road for your buses or your or your shuttles that go to to and from the airport or things like that, those kinds of vehicles would be ready to go from the get-go and just be continuously charged. You wouldn't have to worry ever again about fuel or stopping or taking them off to charge. They would just be good to go the entire time, which
fascinating.
You would need less of them as well, because you wouldn't have to swap them out. So there's real applications for this that are being used today.
Yeah, and Ben, this reminds me of something you and I have been saying for the last many years. There's no one thing that's going to be the magic bullet that solves the problem. It's a combination. So now, what if you had electrified roadways? Let's say take a big, huge municipal airport where you have all those little vehicles running around to service the airplanes, the baggage loading devices on vehicles, all that kind of stuff. So let's imagine that ground area is the road surface, if you will, is all electrified using this kind of technology. Then you have solar panels on top of the vehicles. I mean, it's the combination of things is what I'm trying to stress that I think will equal the real world answer to these kinds of problems. So,
you can imagine a world where we've been talking a lot about planes either using different alternative fuels or using electric power to be able to do planes.
Or a combination.
Yeah, and tarmacs and runways and kind of just where you have to weight and load and unload passengers and cargo,
Yeah.
makes a perfect place for an application like this. And, and like you said, this is another very simple, very clean solution to, to a lot of problems. So I like this one a lot. And again, they're much further ahead than just, they're trying one thing in one place.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, they're doing it in a lot of places and doing it effectively. So that's very
and
cool.
one last note, I guess, is that it demonstrates. I loved it when you were showing their website, folks. And again, if you're only listening to us as a podcast, come out to computeramerica.com and get the show notes, and you can see what we're talking about. But again, showing that there's worldwide interest in this. It's not just Detroit in the United States. The story was that this was the United States, our first implementation of this technology.
Right. And really on a public road, which is something you have to consider because, what happens when it's been run over, 1 million times a year? Is that going to affect the coils or things like that? So, very good. And almost cathartic that it happens in Detroit, of all places. A place that's, invested so much in automobiles and continues to do so. So there you go. Yeah. Story number 1. Very, very cool. Story number 2, we're going to go a little bit further. And, I think when people think of the ocean, one of the first things that springs into mind, at least when it comes to pollution, is the Great Pacific, Ralph, it's like the Great Pacific trash pile, trash swirl.
Floating dump, yeah.
But, if you go out there, it's really not that. The big problem with pollution is that, it's not like, oh no, there's a toaster and there's a beach ball and, it's stuff like that gets picked up all the time. It's more of the microplastics. Everything in the ocean gets broken down by salt and sun and waves and just everything just gets tossed together and it's a big old gross soup. And that's the problem that we're trying to deal with. And story number 2 looks like they're trying to, solve this very hard issue because it's not just a can floating around. It's these little tiny little bits of trash.
Yes.
So story number 2 hopefully has an answer.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely on target. And this story comes from Smithsonian magazine. And the headline here is scientists have created synthetic sponges that soak up microplastics. Subtitle, made from starch and gelatin. So that's not exotic. The biodegradable sponges remove as much as 90% of microplastics in tap water and seawater. And there's so much more to unpack in this story. So let's dive into it. Here we go. Whether synthetic or natural, sponges, of course, are great at ensnaring tiny particles in their many pores. We all know that. And as scientists around the world are beginning to show, sponges' cavity-filled forms mean they can provide a solution to one of our era's biggest scourges, microplastic pollution. And one thing about that sentence that I want to stop and highlight, as scientists around the world. So what we're going to talk about is some research that's coming out of China, but it doesn't mean the Chinese are the only folks looking at, developing these advanced sponges. So a little truth in lending qualifier here before we go on. So in August of this year, not too many months ago, researchers at the Ocean University of China published a study describing their development of a synthetic sponge that makes short work of microplastic debris. In tests, and I want to also stop here, a little qualifier, you'll find out that the 90% that they're talking about in the subhead has to do with optimal situation laboratory tests, okay? But it's still very, positive and optimistic. So in tests, the researchers showed that when a specially prepared plastic-filled solution is pushed through one of their sponges, the sponge can remove both microplastics and even smaller nanoplastics from the liquid. And note, nanoplastics are too small to be seen by the human eye. So to your point, Ben, earlier, this problem of microplastics and nanoplastics in our rivers and lakes and oceans is very insidious because some of it's so small we can't see it, but it's getting into our bodies, and that's why it's such and the bodies of animals, fish, and so forth. This is really a serious problem. So these particles typically become trapped in the sponge's many pores. And note, the sponge's effectiveness varied in experiments. That was my point earlier, in part depending on the concentration of plastic and the acidity and saltiness of the liquid in question being tested. Optimal conditions. Okay, that's the qualifier. Optimal laboratory conditions allowed the researchers to remove as much as 90% of the microplastics. And they tried it in everything from tap water and seawater, and this is kind of funny, to soup from a local takeout spot or little restaurant. You got to love that. But hey, you know what? That's kind of horrifying to think. You go to get a takeout soup or something, or go to a restaurant soup. There could be microplastics in this stuff. This is real, folks. It's very scary. The plastic gobbling sponges are made mostly from starch and gelatin. Looking a bit like a large white marshmallow, the biodegradable sponges are so light that balancing one on top of a flower leaves the plant's petals upright and unyielding. That's how light this sponge they've created is. Which the researchers, which the Chinese researchers suggest ought to make them cheap and easy to transport. So very lightweight, obviously. Inside, the sponge's structure appears less like lots of tiny bubble-like cavities and more like a jagged surface. The sponges, if ever produced at an industrial scale, could be used in wastewater treatment plants to filter microplastics out of the water, or in food production facilities to decontaminate water. So there's some of the real world applications the Chinese researchers are suggesting. And I like this last little note here. It would also be possible to use microplastic trapping sponges like this for example, in washing machines. Just think of how about your hot water heater for your home, that kind of thing. If you think about or some kind of use of these sponges in a filtration thing for your water that comes out of your kitchen faucet, or your whatever the case may be, right? I mean, gosh, the possibilities
everywhere where a filter would do. This would be another barrier. Yep. It would be another thing to do. Yeah. Which and really, removing those kind of microplastics, like and the article itself, kind of goes into some of the other ways that they're kind of working on this. Which, to your previous story, it's like there's no one silver bullet, but if this one is just perfectly engineered to tackle micro and nanoplastic, that's a big issue, and that's really exciting because that's one that needs tackling. So no, it is. It's a really good one. Yep. And good luck from that local takeout spot now being published in published research saying that, so-and-so's takeout soup is filled with microplastics, but our sponges worked on their shoddy soup. So good luck with
maybe
that.
you'd have to have a straw going forward, with these sponges in there. So
absolutely. It's
seriously, maybe
you take any advertising you can get. So there you go. Story number 2, story number 3. We're going to go a little bit further away, and we're going to talk about, NASA's like that kid that never grew up. They're like, I'm gonna try the coolest thing. I'm gonna take my skateboard and I'm gonna land on top of that building. I'm gonna land on top of that roof. I'm gonna land this. I'm gonna jump the staircase and land there. Now it's like those kids went to NASA and they're like, we're going to land something on everything. So a couple of years ago, they did the asteroid that was very famous, the one that was shaped like the rubber duck. They've been landing on moons and Mars and stuff like that. But this one is a little bit different as well. So where are they landing next?
Yeah, and it's a great example of what Ben and I do every Friday. We try to give you a real grab bag, a real variety pack. This one takes us into the area of NASA's domain. And the headline here is NASA will land daring spacecraft on a world 800 million miles away from Earth. And I got this from Mashable.com. Great story. There's in the show notes a fun image of this experimental craft. So NASA's Dragonfly mission, that's the name of the activity here. And in the show notes, I have a link that'll take you to the official NASA website for this activity. Sounds like science fiction. So the Dragonfly mission sounds like science fiction, but it's real. The space agency will launch the car-sized craft fitted with 8 spinning rotors to one of the most intriguing worlds in our solar system, that being Saturn's ocean and dune-covered moon, Titan. Now, Titan's a frigid realm, where methane, or as our British friends would say, methane, a frigid realm where methane, not water, fills lakes and seas. How weird. And where the dunes are teeming with the organic ingredients needed for life as we know it to develop. NASA determined that Dragonfly aced its preliminary design stages, and on November 28, very recently, gave the thumbs up for this dual quadcopter endeavor to proceed to its final construction. The flying craft is uniquely designed for this mission, as it will explore hundreds of miles of Titan's terrain. Wow.
And for those who can really see the images, you can see why they call it Dragonfly.
And that's great image. That lower image you're showing right now is really particularly cool, as if you were on the ground looking up as the vehicle is flying above you. That's a good image. So over a planned mission of close to 3 years, Dragonfly will take off and land at multiple sites on Titan as it investigates the prebiotic conditions that could have provided the brew for life to eventually form in our solar system. So note, prebiotic, no surprise, means conditions existing or occurring before the emergence of life. Wow. So the Titan's dunes are covered in an ice water crust. It always amazes me how water is all over the place. You ever stop to think about that in our solar system? It just blows my mind. Anyway, the Titan's dunes are covered in an ice water crust, allowing carbon-rich molecules to mix with water. Ding, ding, ding. Note, organic molecules contain carbon. Our bodies, for example, are filled with carbon. I think most of us know that. But I think the important thing is the idea of carbon-rich molecules being able to mix with water. This is the thing that scientists feel is a catalytic must-have for life as we know it, right? The world harbors a glimpse into what may have been early Earth's conditions and how the ingredients for life may have spawned in such environments. Wow. Although Dragonfly is primarily designed to find these answers, it can also assess if Titan is a habitable world, meaning whether it could host living organisms, again, as we understand them, and look for potential signatures of life. So like gases that are released by organic entities and so forth. That's what they mean by
really
signatures.
Looking for like something that is like, can only be produced by little amoebas or, little organisms that then put out that thing.
Yeah.
So,
and that's a great image you're showing, by the way, right now, folks. Again, if you're just listening to us on a podcast, come out and take a look at the beautiful image there where the delivery chute is there and then the deployment of the vehicle and showing the vehicle in different angles and so forth. Really, that's a wonderful image. I love it. So Dragonfly is scheduled to launch in 2028. So you're getting a preview here. It will land on equatorial Titan, home to expansive dunes, in the mid-2030s. So this is down the road here. It's a mission to a little-known world with a spacecraft capable of flying some 6 miles a day amid temperatures dipping to minus 290 degrees Fahrenheit, and for our friends in Canada and elsewhere, about 143.3 degrees Celsius. So minus. Ooh, that is cold. Once on Titan, the craft's rapidly spinning blades will have little trouble lifting the nearly 1,000-pound or 450 kilograms Dragonfly through the air. That's because Titan's atmosphere is 4 times as dense as our atmosphere on Earth, providing the blades ample air to blow downward and generate lift. So Dragonfly can reach more than or over 13,100 feet high. That's about 4,000 meters high. So this thing's
I had no idea that the denser atmosphere would actually lend itself better to helicopter or to the Dragonfly. By the way, a quick Google search, and this is assuming a straight line. Which, if anyone has ever seen a NASA launch, when they're trying to get from A to B, they usually kind of slingshot like around the Earth and then around the sun, and they kind of go in circles. A straight line from Earth to Saturn with the fastest spaceship that we have takes about 3 years. 3 years, 2 months.
Yeah, there you go.
To even just get there. So when they say that they're going to launch in 2028, like probably 4 years of that are going to be spent just en route.
Just getting there.
Yeah.
Just getting there. Isn't that something though? But how, and it's, you said earlier, I love your comment about like a bunch of curious kids going, wouldn't it be, Titan is so interesting as far as we know, it's got all these weird things and maybe it has the ingredients for life. And I know. Let's send it. We've had such great luck with our rovers and with our little helicopters that we have on Mars and the moon and all that. Well, let's send one to Titan. Okay, but it's 800 million miles away. No problem.
I think you told me about the documentary on Netflix about the James Webb Space Telescope. And just, how big of an effort that was from the international community.
Huge.
And I learned the phrase single point of failure, which means that if something doesn't happen, then the whole thing kind of just doesn't work. And, the James Webb famously had almost 300 or something like that single points of failure, where if any one of those 300 things just didn't work right, then the whole thing would just be, non-operable. But luckily, everything worked out good. I can't imagine. At least it's kind of like a self-contained rover, and they can just send it. But to me, I'm like, oh, just send it. It'll be easy. But no, this thing has to go perfectly for half a decade.
And here's to your point. Think about this: you get all the way to Titan's moon, 800 million miles, and what if the parachute that deploys this thing fails? Mm-hmm. Oh, dang!
Just made a nice little crater on Titan. So
there you go.
Very, very cool. And hey, look, they even have a little Dragonfly field demo of it, kind of working. And obviously, it's going to be a bit bigger than this, but
about the size of a typical sedan or car. So it's a fairly decent sized vehicle.
Oh, for sure. So there you go. Story number 3. Story number 4. We're going to do a little bit different. And when it comes to 3D printing meat, usually we think about, how do we get a steak? How do we get something that we can eat? How do we get a burger? How do we get a piece of chicken? 3D printing meat is pretty high up there on things people are working on. But something that a lot of people might miss sometimes is that we are meat. And wouldn't it be cool if we could print something that could just kind of fit inside your body? I don't mean like a steak. I mean something that's going to help you feel better. So story number 4, that's my intro for a 3D printer.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, a couple of points here. This story, the headline here is, this 3D printer works, here's the deal, works in your body to repair bones and guts. So what Ben is alluding to in the medical field, and usually we end our segments with something from medical technology because that's something of such great personal interest to me. When you think about 3D printing, you think about 3D printing a widget or a gadget, sometimes even 3D printing an entire house, or 3D printing artificial bones or things that you insert into the body. Mm-hmm. That's great. What we're talking about here, and this is why this just grabbed my attention, this 3D printer works in your body to repair bones and guts. And when I saw that headline, I said, what? Wait a minute. So I got this first from the Daily Beast, and then also did some further looking into this with an article in interestingengineering.com, both wonderful websites, by the way. So let's get into this story. This one I just love. 3D printing technology has come a long way in the past few years, as Ben was alluding to a moment ago, and one of the most promising applications is in medicine. Not only have we seen it used to create artificial bones and tendons even, there's your printing of organic material, right? But it's even capable of making skin that can feel. So there's so many great things going on, but that's outside of the body, then put into the body kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So now, here we go. And I love collaborations. Now, a multi-university team of scientists have taken it a step further and created a 3D printer that goes inside the human body. That's the idea behind a new study published Thursday, December 7, very recently, in the journal Science. And I've got a link in the show notes for that if you want to dive really deep into this. So it's into a new method that allows researchers to use ultrasonic waves to print structures through layers of biomaterials like skin, muscle, and bone. So we're not talking about putting a machine inside your body that does its thing and then somehow you have to pull it out. No, this is so weird. You're going to love this. So the technique is known as, you got to love this, deep penetrating acoustic volumetric printing, or DAVP. and relies on a specially designed substance called sono ink. That's SONO-ink, sono ink, to create different structures within the human body. Now, Junji Yao, a biomedical engineer at Duke University, that's one of the groups that was participating in this, and co-author of the paper, explains, quote, deep penetrating acoustic volumetric printing works by directing focused ultrasound waves at a fluid medium containing sono inks. These inks are formulated to respond to ultrasound, allowing them to solidify in specific patterns as the ultrasound wave scans through them. Wow.
I've never heard of that.
I know. It's so cool. We talked about transmitting energy wirelessly at the beginning of the show. This is sort of like doing 3D printing kind of conceptually, like wirelessly, right?
Yeah.
Using ultrasounds. You gotta just love it.
Well, really, I mean, 3D printing right now, you can get like, some kind of base with a scaffold, and it's this little needle head, just like your printer at home, and it'll go back and forth, over and over. This is doing it, like you said, essentially from a distance. I've never heard of that before.
I know. And it's the applications. The implications and applications of this are profound, folks, and you're hearing it hopefully first from us. So, as biomedical engineer from Duke University, Yao noted, there's a lot of potential for internal 3D printers to do things like repair broken bones and internal wounds. And he goes on to say, for instance, it could be used to print biocompatible structures directly inside the body, such as scaffolds, you just mentioned this, Ben, such as scaffolds for tissue regeneration or sustained drug delivery systems. What? Wow. He further goes on to say this method could significantly enhance treatments for various medical conditions by enabling precise interventions without the need for invasive surgery, thereby reducing patient recovery time and improving outcomes. What's not to love about this, right? And this process uses a tiny catheter that's inserted into the body to deliver the sono ink, okay? And as the sono ink is injected, an ultrasound device on the outside of the patient morphs the material into the shape needed to repair the bone, patch a torn tissue, or even inject life-saving medicine. Here's another way to deploy medication. In experiments, the technique was capable of 3D printing complex shapes such as letters, letters of the alphabet, and spirals through layers of biomaterials such as a pig's heart. Thank you, pigs, for all you've done for research, such as a pig's heart, belly fat, and kidney. It was also shown to be able to effectively deliver a chemotherapy treatment into a pig's liver. Again, thank you, pigs. Reality check. So, little qualifier here, very encouraging. However, the technique has yet to be used on any human patients. More research is needed before it can move to human trials and potentially rolled out to hospitals and medical facilities all over the world. But Ben, what a great way to end our show with, you want to talk about uplifting and hopeful. Wow, I just love this story.
To be able to deliver the treatment, they mentioned chemotherapy or even just setting a bone, it's so primitive the way that we still do it. It's, just make sure it doesn't move. So you wrap it in essentially a little rock, and that way you physically cannot move the bone. But to be able to fix that on the fly or fix that for, inject medicine directly where you need it, so many good applications. And again, using technology that I've never heard of. I've never heard of Sono Ink before, and I'm glad that you introduced us to it. So very cool story number 4. So ladies and gentlemen, if you go out to Computer America, check out the show notes, you're going to find these 4 stories and more with all the links. Ralph does that. But also at the end, you'll find something called honorable mentions. So Ralph, what are these?
Yeah. These are some stories we didn't have time to cover, but I just thought I have to share. And we have the titles and the links and sources for you. Headline here, though, scientists find anesthetic kills cancer cells via unique mechanisms from Newsweek. This one's really surprising because it's a very common thing they found that can help fight cancer. And then the next one is the world's strongest material could be used to make clean drinking water. That's from CNN. That's a good story. Check that one out. I think the last one here is Ceratec. That's SERATEC. Ceratec bakes bricks overnight using CO2 captured from factories. very interesting way to reutilize captured CO2. So those are 3 cool stories to check out.
Yeah, no, and again, all those stories, it's not that they're not good enough that they made the stories. It's just that, hey, we try to keep this show, on a tight schedule. Clearly, we're very, very good at that. So with that being said, Ralph, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And everyone, we should have, I think, if I can check the calendar real quick, we should have one more show here for the year. And then we're going to take a break. And then everyone, yep, you guessed it, we'll be back in January with more of Computer America. So stay tuned for that. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning into the program. If you want to find out more, computeramerica.com, check out Ralph's segment. And until then, everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. Catch you next time. Bye, everyone.